You've heard of the Peaky Blinders. What about the big blinder? A true black country gangster. George Lovatt, the Brierley Hill giant. Roll the credits.
You workmen of Bilston and Brierley, draw near. Sit down, take your pipes, and this song you shall hear. I sing not of war or the state of the nation. Such subjects as these produce naught but vexation. But before I proceed any more with my tale, you shall all drink my health in a bumper of ale. Put it up and without any further parade, John Wilkinson, boys, that supporter of trade.
Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Black Country History Hunter. Today I'm going to be looking into a man that was a giant in stature and a giant in personality. He was born in Saltney in 1870, and his father was a hard-working chain man. They found their way into this area through the chain industry, and he was taken on as a striker at a very young age in Saltney. The man that lies beneath this grave will be forever known as the Brierley Hill Giant, but his real name was George Lovatt. You can see how big this man was from his grave, guys. They reckon you could have fitted a car in here when it was first dug, and they actually used a crane to lift him in, a crane called a derrick, which is a jib with two arms, and it would have lifted 1.5 tons. He wasn't 1.5 tons, guys. He was 50 stones at the end of his life. He sadly died 1933 at the age of 63, and it was said that his funeral, they lined the streets for 1.5 miles. Absolutely phenomenal, this gentleman. So let's go around now, around Brierley Hill, his old haunting spots. Let's find out where he sat, where he lived, and was he a gangster? Let's find out. Right, guys, so we're going to walk up now through Brierley Hill and up to Milestone and have a little talk about George as we go. So his family, were very much a steel family themselves. So he was born in Saltney, as I've said. You can see Saltney here, very small village, but actually huge for the steel industry. So around 1860, a firm from Cradley Heath decided to relocate to Saltney. In doing so, a lot of Midlanders, a lot of black countrymen went with him. And they ended up in Saltney also. Now, George's family didn't come from the black country to Saltney. They were Saltney born and bred. The dad, or George's granddad, was born in a place called West Point, you can see here, just outside Chester, and very much to do with the docks. Then he moved with his family to Saltney to get involved with the chain making industry there, all again revolving around the shipbuilding industry when it was huge business, middle of the 19th century. George was a very intelligent man. He left school at the age of 12, having completed all his exams and proved himself at the right standard, which is amazing, really. At 12 years old, he passed all his exams and he went to Saltney with his father and became a butcher to begin with, but he didn't take to butchering. I think his dad might have wanted something better for him. Maybe he could see the writing on the wall with the shipbuilding trade. But yeah, so he ended up not wanting to be a butcher, and he went into the striking business. His size and his intelligence would have made him a good striker. You might think that striking would be an easy job, that anybody could do it. But to hit a piece of metal in the right place when it's hot, to get it to move in certain ways, is a very difficult thing. You know, as a farrier, we had little hammers, but these guys were using huge hammers. Yeah, so he's very intelligent, and he was a great striker, and he would have become a bit of a legend in Saltney. He'd have met a lot of people up there that were from the Midlands, and he would have heard about Brierley Hill and Round Oak Steelworks that way, I believe. So, around about turn of the 19th century, 1885, I see him in the census in 1881 still living in Boundary Lane, or Foundry Lane, as you can see here. This is Boundary Lane, and this is his actual house today, guys. So his house that he grew up in, there should be a plaque on there, blue plaque. This is the giant's house. I thought it was a different place because I found Foundry Lane and Boundary Lane, but they're the same place, as you can see here. One map says Foundry, one map says Boundary, so it became Boundary after it was Foundry Lane. But yeah, they grew up in this house, number 11 here. He brought all his family with him. So at some point, his dad would have become a bit infirm. It was a hard job, was working in a blacksmith shop. You would have heard that the striking business down in the black country where it was happening, the Midlands was just bursting into flame, bursting into life. The black country was where it was at. So a lot of these people who had gone up in the 1860s were returning, and he returned with them. Now his mom His mom is where he gets his size from. She was 20 stone, his mom, and she's got her own famous story. So the story is this: her uncle, or Mary's uncle, her surname or her maiden name was Carter. Actually, Mary Carter's uncle was called John Carter. Now, John Carter's very famous for being the man that built the Great Eastern's anchors, and even he was known as the biggest anchor maker in the world. He was huge, you know, and he would have met Brunel. I'm sure Brunel would have said that the biggest ship's being made by the biggest anchor maker. Brunel here you can see next to the famous chain that we made in this area, no doubt. But yeah, that was in Millwall, and the mom was from Millwall, and she would have come up north when the shipbuilding trade went bad in Millwall. So what happened was, I think around the 1860s, there was a disaster for a small holding company, which it was made up, Millwall, the docks you can see, they were made up of lots of little shipbuilding firms, and one of the main holders went bust. In doing so, they all fell apart, and the shipbuilding went from 100% to 20%. A lot of jobs were lost, and people were on the move. It was a great time of movement, the Industrial Revolution, as you know. You went where the work was. Anyway, so her family moved up to find work, and they moved up to Saltney, which is where I think she met George's dad, Charles. So George and Charles then had George. George brought the family. He brought the family down here to find work. In doing so, he ended up at Milestone House. And you can see Milestone House here. An amazing little property called Milestone House because of the milestone outside. Now, on this Britain from above picture, I actually think that that's the milestone there. Can you see that there? I think that's the milestone. And it's amazing to me that it's there. There's this image now here. These images here are just, this one here is just opposite his house. Sadly, his house isn't in it. But this was taken in the 20s. He would have been alive and living in Milestone. When this photo was taken, he may have been sitting on the milestone itself. He may have been inside at the window, which is another thing he used to do, taking his bet. So yeah, this man moved down here with his family. He had to make a crust, and he did so. He joined a great team at Round Oak Steelworks, and he was a striker, and a very famous striker. You know, people talked about him, people knew him. Everybody wanted a piece of him. Everybody wanted to know him, to drink with him. He drank in the pub called the Miners' Arms, and his sister ended up marrying the man that ran the Miners' Arms, called Mr. Tandy. Mr. Tandy was an interesting man himself. I believe he was very much a legend of the Black Country himself. But yeah, the sister ended up marrying Mr. Tandy, so he then became extended family of George. Now, after George fell out of a hayrick's quite high, he fell out, and being such a big man, broke his leg in several places, and it was a bad break. That was his career done as far as striking was concerned, or any kind of work, heavy work. So he had to use his mind. He was a smart man, don't forget. He had his size on his favour, so he knew he could do something like run a book. Now, running a book, guys, back in the day, it was illegal. Bit of a snob thing, really. Off-course betting was illegal. So you could go to a race course and put money on a horse, but not off-course. Now, it's a bit wrong, really, because it just meant the people who were working class, who couldn't really afford the races, couldn't have a gamble, couldn't have a bet. I don't know why that was a law, but it was. So people such as George and people like the Peaky Blinders. George is the Peaky Blinders for the Black Country. This is a real gangster, but he wasn't a bad man. Everybody who spoke about him, who I've read about, said that he was a good man. He had a very soft voice, but he carried a big stick, and he was a very big man, and he had a shotgun. He'd set up a company as a haulier with his brother, so this meant that he could cook the books as such, get these learner driver cars on all these houses around Pensnet. It's just cleaning dirty money. All the hairdressers and barbers at Brierley Hill, them cleaning dirty money. So this haulier's business, he could put whatever he wanted through the books. But the people loved him, and they loved the gambling. You know, they loved to put a shilling on here and a shilling on there. That they were using the shop opposite, which was a family member. Mrs. Garbett's shop was being used, which was Mrs. Garbett's was the news agent, so the shop, and then his sister-in-law was the greengrocers. All, you know, this, and the Miners' Arms was also being used, I believe, to run numbers. George himself would sit in the kitchen with a little bowl, and he would take the money and give you tickets. But he was good in the sense that some of these men were bad, some of these bookmakers, you know, they'd run around all day taking in numbers, taking the money, then run off to the next town. But George always paid, apparently, always paid his bills, always paid his debts. And I even think the police would have used him for their bets, you know. It was outside police that would have brought this case. Every now and again, some heads have got to roll. So I think in this case, they couldn't ignore it anymore. But he was given a minimal fine, you know. I think the writing was on the wall then. People realised that they enjoyed a bet, and it's not that bad of a thing to do, is it? Another thing that interests me, that I think might interest you, is that they were using the free library, the new free library in Brierley Hill, before it moved to the new library on Moore Street. They were using that library for the betting, so they'd go there to look at the newspapers for the winners. And you can imagine George, he used to have a couple of lads with him. You can imagine pince-nez lads, flat caps on. They didn't have peaky blinders, because what we'd do round here was we'd have belt buckles. You can imagine the size of George's belt buckle. But they'd sharpen the edges, and they'd also put bolts in to make them heavier. So if they clattered you with that, mate, you'd know about it. But yeah, so you'd have had lads, and there's one article that actually mentions him having some young teenagers in the house with him, running numbers. And if George couldn't do it, he'd go out and do it himself. So he was a bookmaker, an illegal bookmaker. And I reckon he was servicing all round Oak. So 3,000 men at the time. They were coming to him for their betting purposes. Illegal, but it's one of those black markets, isn't it? It's like the old tea trade in the pirates, and, you know, anything that was taxable at the time. The people get what the people want at the end of the day, and if they wanted to have a shilling here and a shilling there, they would. The people liked him. They went to him for their bets because they could trust him. They'd go in the shop and get the bets in the Garbett shop, which is just opposite where we lived, and they'd go elsewhere. But yeah, so he was doing, and on this one occasion, 1912, actually what happened was he had a debt he owed a debt to somebody. Not a big debt, but the brother-in-law, the sister's husband, was a pawnbroker. And basically what happened was, as you can see here, the brother-in-law wanted this money that was owed. So he went down, I believe, and stood outside the house. And he was there loitering around, apparently waiting to find out if anybody was gambling. So this is after the court case in 1904. At this point, he's down as a haulier, a coal merchant. So yeah, he was trying to catch him out. So in the end, Lovatt invited him in, and George's brother Thomas hit him. And then George said to Thomas, "Fetch me gun," which meant me shotgun, you know, fetch me gun. He was going to shoot him, and in the court, you know, he even laughed, and he said, "You threatened to kill him," sort of thing. And he says, "Well, he's going to have to come to me, because I can't go anywhere." But you know, he wouldn't have come to him obviously because he'd been scared after that. But yeah, that got thrown out of court, I think, with the fines. So yeah, he threatened. He was a dangerous man if he wanted to be. But like I said, he was very much respected in the community, I believe. So many stories around his life and living. Right, so I want to walk down now through the town, down to where he actually lived and where he actually died.
May all his endeavours be crowned with success, and his works ever growing prosperity blessed. May his comforts increase with the length of his days, his fame shine as bright as his famous
just walking up now towards where he lived. Now, George was the Brierley Hill Giant was a keen liberal, believe it or not. He actually had photos of Gladstone in his house, Gladstone being a famous liberal. He was part of the liberal scene in Brierley Hill. He was part of the institutions for the Liberal Party, and he helped in getting certain members of the Liberal Party into power. He also was a big man of sport, not just gambling, but also pigeon. So he pigeon raced. You can see here that he's good. He won competitions at pigeon racing, and there's a Christmas party in this particular article, and you can see that at this Christmas party, he won £3. So he was an amazing, in the sense that he kept birds, and he was a winner. He weren't just a guy that kept birds, he was a winner. You know what I mean? So racing, as you know, is a big thing in the area, always has been. To this day, I met somebody down the navigation the other day, a pigeon racer. My he's got a roll of pigeons, and he gets competitions. But yeah, so George was into that. There was a lot of sport back then, a lot of camaraderie in sport. All the pubs had a different sport. His pub, the Miners' Arms, I don't know what the sport was there, but pigeon racing was done all over. I've seen footage of the Turk's Head having them clocked in the 60s. But yeah, absolutely amazing. Whippet racing was big back then as well. whippets are gone now, it's all grey. So we're walking through now Brierley Hill High Street. Now Marsh and Baxter's would have been just there. Now there's a funny story about Marsh and Baxter's. When he had to move because of ill health, he basically borrowed a trolley from Marsh and Baxter's to get him to his new place, which was Unicorn, which is where he sadly died in 1933. But he didn't want anybody to see him. It would have been quite a big affair. It was embarrassing, so he didn't want anybody to see him. So what he did was he did this at night, dead of night, and this guy was on the way back from the pubs, half baked, and he sees it in the middle, he looks up the street, and all of a sudden he sees this huge figure, this outline of a man outlined by the moon, racing down Dudley Road, at a high rate. He screams, because he don't know what's going on. He calls to the people behind pushing, and there's George Lovatt racing down the road, this 50-stone bloke on a trolley, a meat trolley, racing down Dudley Road towards the Unicorn to pay his new home. He wasn't at the Unicorn long before he passed, sadly. He's passing the library now. So yeah, a lot of industry gone now from around here, guys. There was a lot of industry in Brierley Hills. All gone now. All dead. All dead. You alright, big man? All gone. What a sad shame. But yeah, Sir George would have passed up and down here many times, man. A real giant in more than one way. Right, guys, so if you don't recognise where I am, I'm just at the end between Hartshill and Brierley Hill, just by the fire station, where the fire station stands today. Now, many years ago, down there, the pub would have been called the Miners' Arms. Now, the Miners' Arms was a pub that the giant frequented that pub most days, up until his illness got such that he couldn't leave the house. He became bedbound in the end. He specially made bed, may I hasten to add. So he had a specially made bed, he had a specially made chair, and a specially made trap, which we've already mentioned. Now, when I was researching this story, you can actually see where his house once stood, guys. So his house once stood there. What an amazing bit of history, that it's still there in many ways, just under the grass there, and the milestone was just there. So just here was the milestone. So if I was to sit here, if I was here 100 years ago, I would have probably seen him sitting on that stone. He spent most of his days sitting on that stone doing his gambling, selling his numbers, running his numbers. Right, folks, so I'm ending today where we started, at his final resting place. Now, on the day of his funeral, the streets were lined with people. So they reckon for 1.5 miles it was very busy, people waiting to see this great man pass by on his Lovatt brothers coal cart, being pulled by his favourite cob. Absolutely amazing story. Also, he was such a big man that he had to be lifted into his grave by an amazing piece of kit, which was a block and tackle. Called a derrick in the newspaper, but a block and tackle is basically a block with 3 big beams of wood that would lift him in. I think they may have been able to lift him in without that, but the idea being that his whole life he'd have been working with this sort of equipment, working on heavy chain. They would have been using block and tackle a lot, and the idea was fitting for him to be put to rest using something that he would have used all his life, block and tackle. And it just added to the legend, Really enjoyed today. It's been such an amazing day learning all about George and his amazing life, the Brierley Hill giant. But you can see why people, were everywhere on that day, because he was a big character. He had a lot to offer. He was very intelligent, and he gave the people what they wanted, a little bet now and then. Right, guys, so there's a normal size grave around the same date, looking at the design, the black ceramic brick, and then there's George's in the distance there. Wow, look at the size of that. It's like a pond. It's absolutely massive. But yes, here's to you, George. Here's to you, mate. The Brierley Hill giant, you are not forgotten. And I will attend your grave because it needs attending. And anybody I cover, I will attend the graves. So yeah, I'm sure Duncan Edwards' grave is well looked after. But this one needs a bit of work and he needs to be remembered. Absolutely amazing guy. Amazing guy. Right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Really enjoyed this one. We're going to be doing a Legends of the Black Country series, so this is the first one of many to come, I hope. The next one, I don't know what it's going to be yet. Let me know in the comments who you think it should be. We've got Joey Bask. I know he did a lot of great things. He was named after a boxer in the 1930s. We've got Duncan Edwards. We've got the Tipton Slasher. So many legends, so many things to talk about, so many things to cover. Really enjoying doing this at the minute. Love it all. Love speaking to you on the streets as well, so keep saying hello. And yeah, hopefully see you on the next one, guys. And thanks for watching, man. Thanks for subscribing. Really appreciate the support, man. This is going from strength to strength. Love it, love it, love it. See you soon.